Hey, beautiful soul. Welcome back or welcome in for another episode of Spirit Speakeasy. Today's episode, we are going to be sharing real angel stories, earth angels, divine nudges, and mysterious helpers. If you've been here in the Pod Squad for any length of time, one, I'm so grateful to have you. And two, you would probably know by now that I have an affinity for angels. I believe in angels. I've had several different types of angel experiences from the time I was very young, and just lots of different experiences, and have learned different ways to work with that angelic energy. But angel energy is one of the first things that I really remember starting to experience. And in just a minute, I'm going to start this episode by sharing a very personal earth angel experience, my own real angel story. I haven't shared this story publicly before. And honestly, now that I'm thinking of it, probably very few people in my life even know about this story. Let me ask you this. Have you ever had someone show up at just the right time, almost like they were sent to help you in that moment? Or maybe you've heard stories of things like a figure that dragged someone from a car when it was burning and then disappeared as help arrives, never to be seen again by anyone. Have you heard these kind of stories? Maybe you've heard of the concept of earth angels. This is the idea that sometimes divine beings take on human form to guide, to protect, or to help us in moments of need. Or perhaps you've experienced what felt like divine intervention through a person, like a random person, just someone who showed up right at the right moment with the exact words or gestures or presence that changed everything for you in that moment. Or maybe even you've heard stories through someone else you know. These experiences often come through what I like to call human vessels, right? So often it's people, real world people being influenced. But the truth is, we don't know, and I can't possibly know all the details. Perhaps once in a while, angels do take actual human form or can show themselves in human form to intervene when necessary. But often, they do encourage or influence human vessels, ordinary people who seem to be momentarily moved or nudged or even used by spirit to deliver something sacred. It could be a message, a lifeline, a reminder that we're never truly alone. Before I share my story, I want to gently invite you to kind of pause as we're talking and reflect for a moment. I'm going to share my story, and I'm also going to share a few other stories just because I think this is a really special topic. But as you're reflecting, just think about, have you ever had an experience where someone appeared in your life at just the right time? Maybe it was a stranger who helped you when you were stuck. Maybe it was someone who said exactly what your heart needed to hear without even knowing that you were struggling. Or perhaps it was a moment that didn't seem miraculous at the time, but looking back, you realize there was something more, something greater than us at work, something beyond coincidence, let's say it that way. These are what I like to call angel moments, those brief but powerful encounters that leave a lasting imprint on your soul. Moments when it feels like the universe, God, Great Spirit, whatever language you use, sent someone right in that moment. Maybe they looked just like any other ordinary person. Maybe they disappeared as quickly as they arrived, but something about that moment changed you or changed your course. And as I share my own story, I invite you to keep those moments in mind or let yourself be reminded of those moments through the stories I'm going to share today. Let this be a remembering, a soft uncovering of the ways you may have already been held or helped or guided, perhaps even without really realizing it at the time. So let me start by saying, again, I haven't shared this story publicly before, and probably very few people in my life know about this story. This is my own angel in human form experience. And I feel like today is the perfect day to be sharing this just because we're sliding into our June gloom, tailing out of May gray here in San Diego. So it's kind of a little bit of a cozy day, and As I was thinking about this story, I actually was really feeling those emotions again. Like I said, it's maybe a little uncomfortable to share, but here it is. As I was remembering back, I know I was in about second grade. I would have been right around 7 years old. It was the dead of winter in Boston when this takes place. My mom had to work, and back then there was this program in kind of the greater Boston area. And we all referred to it as like daycare moms, daycare mothers. It was basically before or after school childcare in the home of women in the community, and it was run by some sort of organization. And this morning, my usual before school daycare mother was sick. So they kind of were emergency version placing me with someone else just for that morning, and I would have to hurry. We needed to leave extra early, and I'm not a morning person, and when I was a kid, even less so. I was really not a morning person, and really not a freezing cold snowstorm winter morning person, if you can imagine. I had my book bag, because back then we carried all these heavy books even when we were little, a winter coat, and I had these brand new snow boots just in time for a classic New England nor'easter snowstorm last night. Lots of schools got canceled, but not mine. I was in Catholic school at the time, so we didn't necessarily have to follow the public school closures. So my school decided to stay open, unfortunately. And my mom was in this big rush. We were almost on the other side of town from the hospital that she works in. I was getting really anxious, and I remember feeling nervous and uncertain and thinking, I don't know the way to school from this house. I'd been walking by myself since I was like 5, but the other few places that I had been like assigned to for daycare, I knew the way, or I had a chance to learn the way from the school to their house. I'm so anxious in my little body. And this woman who's supposed to be watching me is saying that I'm going to walk with her sons. Apparently, they went to the same school as me. They were older. I didn't know them at all, but they were going to show me the way. And these were the days when lots of kids literally had to walk to and from school in the snow uphill as a part of regular life. So that's what we were going to do this morning. And they were older than me. They were bigger than me, obviously, and they walked fast. And we were walking up this big hill that was the way to school, and they kept yelling, "Hurry up," at me. And it was uphill and so early in the morning that a lot of the sidewalks, the walkways in front of people's houses as we walked up this big hill, were still covered with deep banks of snow. And of course, it's gray and cold and windy. And these snowbanks, or the snowfall, was, at least it was deep for me. And I was trying my best to keep up, but the snow drifts were above my little knees at the time. So every snow drift that I was stepping in, like I was up to my knees in this deep, like freezing cold snow. And even worse than that, as I lifted my foot out each time, my new boots kept sliding off my heel. And before long, I knew I definitely had blisters in there. And it was so painful to keep slipping my ankle, my heel in and out of my boot. And I tried calling out to those boys, but they kept slipping further and further away up that hill. And no matter how hard I tried, I just can't seem to keep up with them at all. Just as they disappeared over the top of this big hill that we were on, my boot slips off and is swallowed by a snowdrift, and I can't find it anywhere. And tears are streaming down, burning my face in the freezing cold air, and my foot is burning from the freezing cold snow as I try to walk and find my boot, and I need to sit down even just for a second to get some relief for my little sock drenched foot in snow. And fear really overwhelmed me. I know I'm definitely lost now. Maybe I had a panic attack. I'm not exactly sure. But the next thing that I remember is this really big man, that reminded me of like a strong, sturdy lumberjack scooping me up and carrying me into a nearby hospital urgent care. I remember he seemed very kind and made me feel much more calm. And I wasn't afraid of him at all, even though he was like this giant stranger picking me up and physically carrying me. I just wasn't scared of him at all. I don't know how I got to school, but the next thing I remember, I'm sitting across a huge wooden desk from Sister Alice, the school principal, waiting for my mom. I am exhausted and still in fear. I'm certain I'm going to be in so much trouble when my mom gets there for making a problem and for my mom needing to like leave work and come to the school. I don't know about you guys, but that was a big deal back in my day. Luckily, my mom wasn't angry and I wasn't in any trouble at all. But my mom did bring me a change of clothes and shoes, and I did have to stay at school for the rest of that day. Later, I was told Later, I was told that this angel of a man found me lying in the snow with no shoes on, very cold, and starting to fall asleep. He was driving down this big hill. It was, in fact, a big hill. He was driving down this big hill very slowly because of all the ice and snow from the night before and the past couple days of this snowstorm. And he just happened coincidentally to notice me there, a tiny girl, even as he's in the middle of the street with his car through the parked cars and laying in the snow. He just apparently saw me there because he happened to be driving so slowly down the hill. And he brought me into the urgent care, which apparently just happened to be a little further up the hill, just out of sight from where I was. He spoke to the nurse. He waited for a few minutes with me and then essentially disappeared. To this day, I don't know who he was. He didn't leave a name, and I guess no one asked. It was a different time. There's no record of who brought me in. And honestly, I don't even remember seeing his face clearly, just this towering, warm presence who made me feel safe when everything in my tiny world felt scary and overwhelming. I've thought about that moment occasionally over the years, how close I might have come to real harm, actually, how no one else had seen me, even, people coming into their house to go to work or starting to move around in the morning. No one had seen me. I sometimes thought about how he just happened to be driving slowly enough to notice a little girl collapsed in the snow. And I've come to believe that he wasn't just a kind stranger, that he was an angel in human form, even just for that moment. So, whether you believe in divine messengers, sometimes momentarily walking among us, or simply that once in a while, something beyond our understanding uses ordinary people to do extraordinary things, I know this for sure. That day, someone was sent to help me. And in that moment, they showed up with warmth and strength and love and kindness. And sometimes angels wear robes and have wings and paintings, and sometimes they wear flannel and show up in pickup trucks during nor'easter snowstorms. So today, as we move through this episode, I want to share some other stories like this, not the kind where angels arrive in a blaze of fiery light to perform a miracle, but the quiet ones, the ones that momentarily move among us, where someone shows up, says the right thing, appears just in time, and you're left wondering if they were really who they said they were, or maybe representing something more. Because maybe, just maybe, angels are once in a while moving among us. That's my personal angel share. And as we go through, like I said, think about your experiences or just anything that rises up as we're talking about these angel stories that I'm going to share with you from other people. Perhaps you've had an angel experience of your own, or a human influenced temporarily, momentarily by an angel to show up for you in a divine way. This next story I'm going to share is The Angel in the Hospital. This is shared via a website called Guidepost, and I will link all of these additional stories. Mine is not this is the only place mine's public right now. But these stories that I'm going to share from other people, I'll list the websites where you can find the stories in the show notes in case you want to take a look at them. This story takes place in 1987 and was shared by a woman who was a night nurse in a hospital herself. So like that's what she did. She worked the overnight shift as a nurse in a hospital. And this was in 1987, so late 80s. And there was a time in her life when she found herself praying the same desperate prayer over and over again as she recounts it. She shares in her story that her mother was already in a nursing home, and just recently her father, who had always been the rock in the family and certainly her rock and support, he was also rapidly declining. His memory was fading and he was terrified of losing his independence. And she had seen this type of decline before in others. And the way she shares the story, she said she remembers praying, I just don't see how this can end well. So kind of like a please God help. After her dad suffered a stroke, he fell into a coma, and her brother and her brother's wife shared the vigil with her. So they really would come and take the night shifts and stay with their dad at night. And she would, after she was done nursing, she would go stay with her dad during the day. And they had their pastors and church friends and support community all came and went to help however they could. And she spent the days, reading the Bible and singing hymns and songs, worship songs to her dad, because those were his favorite, things to listen to, just to comfort him and to try to help him. And the way she recounts it, she says one evening the hospital brought in a hospice nurse to help her fill out transfer paperwork. And it was clear that the end was nearing, that the transition time was almost there. And she spoke with a doctor who came out from the ICU, the intensive care unit, and he'd heard that this nurse's father was someone important. And she told him, yes, he was a pastor, he was a minister. She asked how long a person could survive without food or water. And the doctor looked at her dad, who was still really uncomfortable and showing a lot of signs of pain, said, it's going to be a few more days, by my assessment of him. And after that doctor left, she finished the paperwork and was working on, making sure she filled everything out properly. And then she felt moved to pause and call her sister and update her. And she leaned near the hospital window, like to try to get better reception on her call. Remember, this is the 80s. And as she spoke, she felt something moving behind her. Her dad, hadn't moved in days. He was in a coma. The doors were closed. She didn't hear anyone come in. To her understanding, they were alone, but she could feel something moving behind her. And then in the reflection of the window, she says that she caught like a tall figure standing behind her out of kind of the corner of her eye in the window reflection. I don't know about you, but I would probably be freaking out by this point just because I started a little bit easy. But the way she says it, she catches, through the window reflection, this tall figure standing behind her. And at first she tried to like explain it away. She looked down to the street from the window. She saw the traffic. She saw, nothing reflecting upward because she thought like, okay, maybe there's a reflection from the street just causing a glare or like a reflection in the window. And she's like, okay, checking all the possible explanations the way she saw it. And everything just looked usual. Nothing was reflecting in from the outside. And then she turns around and really looks at this tall figure. And the way she says it is like, oh my gosh, I recognize this person. And she said it was the same figure that she'd seen decades ago, back in 1987, when she was a night nurse. And that nurse, that evening, that night, she'd seen 3 nursing assistants doing their rounds, checking on patients. But suddenly a 4th figure appeared, taller than the rest, gliding, not walking down the hallway. And she knew then, she says, like deep in her being, that she had seen an angel. And over the years, she'd often say to others, angels walk these halls, although she'd never shared that story fully. But spending that time beside her father that night, she understood why she had seen the angel all those years ago. It was so that she would recognize this angel now and not be afraid. And she says the next thing that happens is the angel passes slowly over her father's body, and the movement was graceful and peaceful and beautiful. And then she says she sees the angel pass through the hospital wall and out of sight. And she said she knew just in her soul that an angel had been sent, like not just for her dad, but also for her to witness that her dad was going to be at peace with the God of his heart and his understanding. And she turns back to the window and tells her sister, still on the phone, Dad's gonna pass away tonight. He's gonna go tonight. And I guess the sister was like, how do you know that? Like, why are you saying this? And when her brother and sister-in-law arrived to kind of switch shifts with her, she told them the same thing. She said, as she spoke to them, she was like so shocked because she was so calm in her own knowing after seeing this angel, that even as she told her brother and sister-in-law in person, that there was no fear in her voice at all. And actually, she didn't finish filling out that hospice paperwork that evening. She just sort of sat there and took in the peace and the sacredness of that moment, and just spent that final few hours spending time with her dad, saying goodbye. And she said when she had to leave the hospital a little while later, she was taking turns with her brother. Her dad passed shortly after that. And that night when she was driving home, she says was like any of the last nights of the entire week before. She said she wasn't like heavy-hearted with sorrow. She was really feeling like this peace and calm over her. She was filled with comfort and clarity in a way that she claims she never experienced before. And as she was telling the story, it had been 6 years since the passing of her dad. And she said that peace never had left her from that day forward. She doesn't really share the story very much, I guess. She doesn't want people to think, her going around saying she saw an angel. But she says, still, even in her nursing, when someone is struggling and needs hope, she sometimes will just quietly share this story because she's held on to it all these years, knowing without question that angels sometimes walk among us and sometimes they come just when we need them most. Have you ever had that type of experience in a hospital where you felt an angel or a presence or a calm or even a loved one from the other side? This next story is a little different. This next story is called Angel on a Train. And again, I'm going to link it in the show notes. It is shared by a person. She shares her name in the story. Her name is Michaela. And the way she says it is sometimes angels show up when we least expect them, not necessarily in glowing light, wearing robes and having wings, but disguised as the very people that we're conditioned by society to overlook. So she tells her story on an ordinary train ride in Germany. The way she says it is she boards this train with a few colleagues, expecting just her usual commute for the day, nothing special about this day. But right before the doors of this train close, a man jumps on board the train, like kind of slips right through the doors at the last second. And she says, noticing him, she noticed that his clothes were kind of worn and his appearance was like a little disheveled. And he looked like someone other people might label homeless or a beggar. Back then is the way they used to talk about it. And he sits near this woman and her colleagues and starts quietly setting up like some kind of musical instrument and then begins to play. But she says the strange thing is that he's not playing for tips and he's not playing for the crowd. He's just playing for himself. And she says the passion that he exudes, that they can feel from him through this music, really even just like fills that whole train car. And she says at first, as she's witnessing this, like no one really in the train pays much attention, but slowly as the train continued on its journey from station to station, something kind of shifted in the energy, that people on the train began to listen. And when he finished his song, she and her group of colleagues, gave some applause because they were genuinely shocked and moved by the talent that this stranger had, this man. And she said that after, they applauded and kind of were like, wow, that was great, he really lit up and kind of looked up and started smiling, because again, he was only playing for himself, not noticing anyone else. And she said then he began to speak to them, and he had broken English at first until she realized that this man was actually Italian. They were in Germany, and she actually spoke Italian. So she switched languages, and the way she recalls it, like as she was able to switch to the language that he spoke, a whole new conversation unfolded. And he told her his name was Angelo Fortunato, which, in Italian translates to lucky angel. And for the next 20 minutes of her train ride, he opened his heart in a way that, most strangers on a train and in a small conversation never do. This man, Angelo, shared that he lost his mother at a very young age, that she was hit by a car in a car accident. And later, his father passed away of a really terrible illness. And despite everything, Angelo had really been able to hold on to his faith. And even though he'd been through so many dark times, and I guess he even opened up and shared with her there were moments that he thought about ending his life, that he didn't know how he could go on through all of this struggle. But I guess as he tells her, even in these moments, these depths of despair, he said, if I ever decided to take my life, would I harm innocent people with me? Would that be fair in the eyes of God? No, it's not for me to decide the fate of others. So even in his own despair, he was thinking like, well, what if I did something and it accidentally hurt other people? He's such a good man that he couldn't even bear the thought of that. And the battery on his small instrument died, I guess, as he was like continuing to play. And the way she recalls it is this man gently cupped his hands like around the battery part of this instrument to warm it. And he told her, when my batteries run out, I flip my hat. If people like my song, they may help me, buy a new one. So the way she's saying it, like she just sits there stunned, listening to this man share his life story, to talk about, how he's an artist and a philosopher, and he in all actuality is just a stranger on the train. But this music that he's playing and the words that he's sharing really just cut through and reach right into her heart. She actually herself hadn't been in a good place that day. She'd been feeling really lost and uncertain and brokenhearted about, her life and finding love. And she said then, in a strange turn, Angelo suddenly looks at her and said something that made her kind of lose her breath for a second. He just turned and looked right at her and said something to the effect of like, stop looking for the right man. He'll come and find you. Don't put yourself below a man, and they'll need to take what they need and leave without looking back. And the way he said it just really struck her. She never shared with him that she was having a hard time in love and was really looking for love. This man never asked her for money. He never like passed around his hat or anything. He just shared his songs and his story and his soul with her that day on the train when she really needed it the most. And Michaela says she never saw him again, but she also never forgot him. And she said, I don't know how he ended up on the streets of this German city, but I know once Angelo was a handsome Italian man walking the streets of Torino with a beautiful woman on his arm, and he was a son and a father and a total artist. And so she said her heart was so inspired by the words that he said that she really shifted the way that she was pursuing love, and shifted in that moment her hopefulness for the future. So, we never truly know who walks beside us. And sometimes they look like the forgotten or those that would go unnoticed. And the way she says it is sometimes they come with music and sometimes they come with hard-won wisdom and unexpected kindness. So I guess the moral of the story is be mindful how we speak to people and how we acknowledge them and who we speak to, because sometimes angels maybe are sent to sit beside us for a few minutes on a train and share their story. The next story is a really interesting one, and this is a smaller moment. So I really wanted to include this one because I'm wondering if the way that this story is shared, if anyone will be able to connect dots in their own life for this particular story. Excuse me while I take a little sip of water. I'm still a little froggy. So this next story is Angel Wings Flapping Through the Blinds. And this story is shared anonymously. I'll link the in the show notes where all of these stories are from, but this is an anonymous recounter of this story. So this story, the way it's set up is sometimes the most extraordinary moments happen in the quietest places, like right in the middle of a seemingly ordinary morning inside an ordinary home with an ordinary family just going about their morning routine. And this story is from a woman who experienced something that she, even as she was telling the story, says like she still couldn't fully explain, but she just has never forgotten. And after hearing the story, you might agree that she wasn't as alone in this house as she thought. So the story happens about 20 years ago, and this woman is married. Her husband leaves for work early that morning at like 4 a.m. It's just the way his job works. He gets up real early. She stays in bed in the mornings. That's their usual routine because he leaves so early. She kind of drifts in and out of sleep, cozy in their warm, toasty home for another few hours until she's going to have to wake up. They just work slightly different hours. And so by around like 9 o'clock on this day, she was still asleep. It was like a chilly day. She's wrapped all in her warm, toasty blankets. And something odd just kind of stirs her awake from this cozy slumber. It wasn't like something normal in the way she recounts it. It's not like a loud crash or something falling or someone yelling. But she says instead it's like a repetitive, odd sound. She describes it as a rhythmic fluttering. And the way she says it, it's almost like fabric flapping against itself. Like the way I imagine it is like if you've ever heard the sail of a boat or like a flag flapping in the wind, like fabric flapping against itself. And it's repeating over and over and over. And so she's woken up by this noise, this rhythmic fluttering, she calls it. And as she blinks her eyes awake, she's like still a little distorted, still a little waking up. But she looks around to try to see like the source of the noise. And she says that two panels from these vertical blinds in her bedroom were flapping around kind of wildly, slapping and swaying into each other over and over and over. But the strange part was that the rest of the blinds, like the identical train of blinds, identical panels, side by side, everything else is perfectly still. It's just these two blinds that are waving around and flapping into each other. For those of you in Southern California, we have a lot of vertical blinds. Where I grew up in Boston, we really didn't have a lot of these vertical blinds. It's essentially, it's on a window in this story, but it's essentially like the type of blinds that go normally with a sliding glass door. So they're just straight up and down pieces of plastic. And there's a little rod at the end and you can twist them open or you can pull them all to one side or push them all to one side. So you can get a mental picture of those type of blinds. But she says also, not only is it just these two blinds and none of the others, but there's no draft, there's no open window, there's no fan on in the room, there's no wind anywhere. It's just these two blinds like flapping furiously in the silence of her house. She's the only one home. So she said her first instinct, oddly, wasn't fear. And she said she wasn't even confused. She just was so aware of what was happening. She said she was just like hyper present, like hyper aware almost. The feeling that she describes is like very peaceful and calm, but also very urgent at the same time. And something deep inside of her, it's like she just knew that it wasn't just nothing, that it wasn't random, that it was a nudge for her to get up, a nudge for her to get moving. So she follows this internal nudge. The way she says it in her story is like she sat up, she takes a breath, and she gets right out of bed, and she opens the bedroom door to step into the hallway. She gets another kind of sense, an intuition, a feeling. This time she says it's like unmistakable. It's a very sharp smell as she opens the door of something burning. She says it's the kind of smell that like jolts you instantly into awareness, even if you were a little bit sleepy, like something is wrong. This is not normal. Again, she's home by herself. So she rushes down the stairs. Of course, her like heart is pounding. She's scared to check out what's going on in her house. And the smell, as she like starts moving and going down the hall and down the stairs, she says the smell is getting like louder and louder. She's looking around. She's checking out like what could the smell be coming from. She finally opens the laundry room, like the laundry door area, and she finds that the dryer is still running. And it's super duper hot, like much more hot than a normal clothes dryer should be. I guess before he left, her husband had just like tossed in some laundry before leaving, like just intending to start drying it before work. But something had like gone wrong with the machine, and the machine didn't turn off like normal. But, you know, when he left at 4 to this point at 9 a.m., the dryer didn't automatically shut itself off. So this machine had been running for like 5 or more hours straight. And the inside, she just like turned it off and opened it. The inside, she says, was like scorching hot. And as she tried to reach in, the clothes are like almost too hot to touch, like on the edge of catching on fire, is what she says. Obviously, she had turned it off immediately. She pulled out all of the hot laundry, thinking like, okay, let me just like get this stuff out and try to get some air around this. And she was just like stunned with how hot everything was. And as she pulls out the laundry and like turns the machine off and unplugs it, she just kind of falls back and sits down like totally in shock. If she hadn't woken up when she did from all the way upstairs in a closed, cozy, dark bedroom, and if she hadn't gotten up, like obeyed or honored this nudge that she felt and gotten up, if she hadn't trusted that little quiet nudge of two blinds flipping for no apparent reason, her entire home could have caught on fire. Who knows? It sounds like this dryer was like very close to flames, and she could have still been asleep upstairs even and not found out at all until it was far too late. And as she was thinking about it later, she tells in the story, kind of returning in her mind to that moment in her bedroom, the blinds moving on their own, that sound that wakes her up, she couldn't shake that feeling that someone or something had been there trying to get her attention, not with fear, but with love, with urgency, but kind of wrapped in gentle calm, but still urgent. And the way she recounts the story, she came to believe that it was an unseen angel. She never saw an angel standing at the foot of her bed. There was no wings. There was no like voice from the heavens, just these two flapping blinds with no breeze to be seen, and an undeniable, like deep knowing in her core that she felt like she was saved that day. And in the story, the way she says it is she still calls it one of the most profound spiritual experiences of her life, not because of what could have happened, but because of how she knows deep in her heart and soul that she was guided away from danger. And in the story, she says she now often says that she thinks angels show up even more than we realize. And sometimes they don't speak in words. Sometimes they just nudge a blind or a feeling just enough to wake us up, she says. So I thought that was a really beautiful story. And I mean, obviously she doesn't see an actual angel, but I wonder if you have had something like that where it's just an unexplainable something, a physical sign or something happening or a movement, and then this feeling that you have. That's why I wanted to include this story. The next story is going to be our last story of today, of these real angel experiences, but it's no lesser a story than the others. I really tried to choose the most powerful and varying stories that I could. And this last story is called A Voice That Saved a Child. This is also anonymously submitted to a totally different website. And this is also told by a female. And the way she tells the story is on the day of this angel encounter. She was having this big cocktail party at her house, and where they live, it's kind of near the beach, and lots of people open their homes and the neighbors get together. And so it was a party normal for the time of season, and her neighbors are filling her house, and the party's like in full swing, music, families, barbecue going, and suddenly they run out of ice. So she volunteers, to go get more, and she grabs her wallet and keys, and they drive like big four-wheel vehicles where they are. And so she grabs her stuff and like heads to the car, to this big four-wheel drive vehicle that she has. And the way she recounts it in the story is she's like, at the time where this house was, it's designed for the tropics, and upstairs was like enclosed and living and about raised like 15 feet up. This is a weird thing about me. I sometimes watch these like House Hunter International type shows, or like House Hunter in the Tropics. Or if you've ever seen in kind of like the Gulf Coast, or that part of Florida or Texas, in these high flood zones, these tropic zones, if you've never seen it, they put these giant like 15-foot beams beneath the houses, and then the houses are way up on top of that. And it's so if there's these high hurricane winds or giant floods, that the house itself is often safer. So that's kind of how her house was. The upstairs is like enclosed for a living space, and then these 15-foot beams are underneath, and the air can kind of pass through, wind and rain can pass through, and underneath they have these like concrete floors that are mostly open air. So typically most people like park their car under there so that it can be safe from the weather, because it's just open air, but it's like a big driveway patio under your house. So that's where her car was, and she parks it under there so that if it is raining, protects it from the weather. So she grabs her stuff, kind of heads down those stairs and jumps into her car, and she's about to, start your engine so that she can go grab some ice for everybody at the party. And she says she actually heard a voice speaking to her. She says the voice was not coming from another person, because she's all alone. Everybody else is up at the party upstairs, but she heard the voice so clearly and firmly. And she said the voice very firmly, directly, clearly says, "Look behind the car." So she didn't even have time to like think or process or think like, where's this voice coming from? It's almost like she immediately starts moving. She gets out of this four-wheel vehicle and goes and looks underneath the car, and there was nothing. And she's just like, okay, this is really weird. She hears the voice again, "Look behind the car." And so then she keeps walking around, keeps trying to look around. And as she went around to the back of this big vehicle, she says in her story, what she saw felt like getting like punched in the gut. She felt actually sick, because behind the vehicle, sitting lined up just perfectly with the wheels so you couldn't see them, was a tiny little boy just playing on his own. And she said like immediately she recognized the boy. He's a little 2-year-old, and it's her friend, her neighbor's little boy. She had invited a bunch of friends to this party, obviously. And she said, as the festivities were going and all the kids were playing, someone must have just lost sight of this little guy. And he must have just come down the stairs, wandered down on his own to play. And probably just nobody noticed because of the hustle and bustle of the party. She must have lost sight of her son for just a moment, and he clearly wandered away unseen. There was enough adult eyes. She wasn't quite sure how he could have wandered away unseen, but that is what happens. And she said, even as she thinks about the story to tell it on this website, she gets chills. And she says like sitting behind that vehicle, the memory of like seeing that little boy just innocently playing, it still gives her the chills, like goosebumps all over, to think about how close they came to a tragedy that day. And she said occasionally, very rarely, she hears that mysterious voice still. But when she does, she never hesitates. She listens right away and gets on top of it. It hasn't been as dramatic as this occurrence, but one little boy is alive because she listened to that calm, steady, direct voice that she received. So, a short story, but a really powerful story. And I love that through these stories, we had one that was, this voice just out of nowhere, one that was just those blinds flipping. We had the other that was, an actual visual experience of this angel of peace with her dad in the hospital. We have my experience, which is that amazing man that saved my life as far as I'm concerned. And we have that incredible stranger on the train that gave this deep wisdom inspired by spirit, the woman believes. So as we close out today's episode, I want to leave you with this gentle reminder. Angels don't always arrive with wings. Sometimes they show up in muddy boots and flannel jackets and soft smiles or steady hands. Sometimes they don't say anything at all, but something about their presence shifts the entire energy of a moment. Maybe they're divine messengers, maybe they're human beings just being nudged by spirit or angels just at the right time, or maybe they're both. But whatever you believe, I invite you to stay open to the possibility that help, divine guidance, comfort, connection, peace can appear sometimes out of the blue when we least expect it. And if you've ever had your own angel moment, no matter how big or small, I would truly love to hear about it. You can email me, joy@joyfulmedium.com. You can leave it in a comment wherever you're listening to or watching this episode. You can email it to me right through my website because these stories matter. These small accounts, these big accounts, however the experience shows up, it's important to share it, even if you want to share it anonymously. It's not only the stories themselves that matter, but they remind us of this invisible thread of grace and support that weaves through all of our lives. So until next time, I hope that you will stay open, stay connected, and know that you are never truly alone. I'm always grateful for you being here with me. And I think that this is perfect timing in the energy and everything that is happening to just remind us that sometimes perhaps there are bigger energies moving among us. So big hugs, lots of love, of course. I think we all need that. Bye for now from inside Spirit Speakeasy.